after talking with renters and with property managers about the challenges of keeping information up to date on all the different waiting lists that exist in the affordable space, but then also in talking with some owners around COVID-19 and how things are changing in the way that people are thinking about managing their properties. I think this will be a great resource to consider in, when you do have a vacancy coming available, do you want to have sort of a ready list of folks who have self-reported to you their household size, their income, and what they're looking for, that they really are interested in your properties, but rather than trying to field a lot of phone calls and visits to the property, you would already have a list of folks on a waiting list who are ready to come in and rent from you.
It is a common saying amongst real estate investors that you make money when you buy, not when you sell. While this catchy phrase has value, it fails to convey how easy it is to lose money through poor property management. Whether you self-manage or hire a professional, it is important to understand how to navigate the common pitfalls and challenges with rental properties without losing your shirt or your mind. That's why you have tuned in to Maximizing Your Property Value, the apartment owner's guide to operating rental properties as a successful business. I'm your host, John Stiles, real estate agent and team leader of the VIP Real Estate Group at Bridge Realty. As a current multifamily investor and former property manager myself, I understand the headaches and difficulties of keeping an investment property from becoming a money pit and time sucker. It takes a solid business plan, it takes tested systems, and it takes key team members to actually find success. So let's take a deep dive and maximize your property value. All right, welcome back everybody to another episode of Maximizing Your Property Value. I'm so glad that you have joined us today, and I'm really excited for our guest today, who is Sue Speakman-Gomez. Sue, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hi, John. I'm happy to be here.
Very good. So just a little bit about Sue. She has been the president of Minnesota's HousingLink since 2010. Previously, she was the community relations manager at HousingLink. In her role, she steers the organization, which was founded in 1999, toward its mission to improve people's lives through information expanding their affordable rental options. With a staff of 8, HousingLink provides the most comprehensive rental housing information in Minnesota. There were 1.4 million searches for affordable housing in Minnesota through their website in 2019. Sue is a graduate of the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, with a BA in American Studies, and has operated 26 units of market rate rental housing since 1999. So with that brief bio, Sue, could you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and how you got into your role today?
Sure. So I actually sort of almost literally fell into the world of multifamily housing and the nonprofit sector. So back in the late 90s, I had graduated from college and I was looking for employment. I had done a short stint in commercial property management through Welsh companies in downtown St. Paul. And then I actually took a position over at Anoka County in the community development department, working with the home funds and continuum of care, which is really focused on homeless programs in Anoka County and now throughout statewide, nationwide, they have the funding available. And in meantime, I started working for our family's rental property business in Anoka and I lived on site and managed our 24 unit property, and then later on added a duplex to my portfolio. And I still actively manage those today. And then after a couple of years at Anoka County, moved over to HousingLink to help recruit landlords to work with HousingLink to advertise vacancies and consider renting to folks with Section 8 vouchers and other resources. So I've been at HousingLink actually since 2002, but in the role of president now for the last 10 years. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very great background to have there, and having the personal experience with rental properties, and also advocating for landlords and tenants through your organization there. So very neat. Can you tell us a little bit about how HousingLink got started and what kind of need was HousingLink trying to fill?
So back in the mid 1990s, there was a lawsuit against the city of Minneapolis and Minneapolis Public Housing Authority about concentration of race and poverty in North Minneapolis and sort of intentionally segregating African American households into North Minneapolis. And as part of the lawsuit, later Metro HRA actually joined the lawsuit, and it was renters who, working with legal aid, brought the lawsuit against these agencies. And when the lawsuit settled in court, there was a consent decree, so it's known as the Holman Consent Decree. So it's Holman, Hollman, Cisneros, if anyone really wants to read about it. And so there was a paragraph in that consent decree that talks about creating a clearinghouse of affordable rental housing information. So HousingLink was actually born out of a paragraph. So a group of landlords, renter advocates, legal aid attorneys, folks from HUD, Minneapolis Public Housing, Metro HRA, Hennepin County, all came together and had a lot of conversations over a few years. And ultimately, HousingLink was formed out of this broad base of community landlords and renter advocates. And so, and our mission is very much still the same as it was back then. It's, we've maybe updated a few of the terms, but really we're focused on increasing housing choice and access for renters in now Minnesota. We originally started out just serving the Twin Cities. And the way we do that is by helping to get landlords to advertise vacancies through our site. We capture listings from Craigslist and other sources and share them through our site. And we also help educate and inform renters and landlords about the landlord-tenant relationship, fair housing, what does it mean, how might it impact you, really in the furtherance of helping renters have more choice and access in our community, and also sort of helping to lift up landlords to be doing the best job they can.
Okay. Well, that sounds like, it's a great mission and lots of good action items there. So why don't we dive into that a little bit? And I don't know if this might be a good time to bring up the HousingLink website, where a lot of the resources are housed. But what can you point out some of the educational and other type of resources that HousingLink makes available?
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and take over and share my screen. And so on here, this is housinglink.org. We are a nonprofit, so it's always a .org. And so we have several main sections to our website. Prominent here right on the homepage is the search function, so that when renters come here, it's mobile friendly. If it's a mobile screen, you really see that where do you want to rent in Minnesota is the leading piece that you get to interact with. So you can enter a city, a county, a zip code, you can enter the name of a school or a place of employment, and then start your housing search. So we did 1.4 million searches in 2019, and we had about 21,000 listings advertised through the site. So a decent amount of traffic considering that Zillow does 10 million nationwide. And so we also, within each header on the website, have information. So we explain all of the different subsidized housing programs and what they mean for renters and for owners. For property owners and managers, we have a whole list of information, resources specific to COVID-19. This is how you come in and access your account and create listings to share through our site. We have information. We're working with the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs to help end veteran homelessness. So we have information on those programs, as well as just other information and resources. We work closely with the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association. And so you'll see like our Minnesota eviction process really connects you over to the information they've created and resources, as well as our landlord meeting calendar also includes a lot of their events as well. Housing Resources is really dedicated a fair amount to renters, but also I would say in the accessibility and the fair housing sections, there's a lot of awareness and education resources that are both for renters and for landlords that help explain what is fair housing, what might it look like when you're in a conversation with someone. We have short form videos that help explain the different topics. And then we also have our Beyond Backgrounds program, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more in a minute. And then under our data and research tab, We actually have launched in 2019, we launched the Minneapolis Rental Housing Brief and St. Paul Rental Housing Briefs, which look at what's happening each month in the rental market. And now with COVID-19 having such a big impact in our communities everywhere, we've added this COVID-19 rental housing trends section of the website where each month we're adding in data. So you can see we cover January through April at this point, and we look at what are the median rents that we're capturing. This includes listings advertised through our site, as well as those that we get from listing feeds from management companies and data that we pull from Craigslist and other sources. And it includes the entire market, not just affordable rental, but even including the luxury market. So we have rent data, data by building type, by rental type, private market affordable, affordable housing, and then we also look at specialty listings because we, of course, market heavily and work closely with accessible housing and veteran-friendly options as well. So that's kind of a lot, but in a nutshell, we have a ton of information and resource available through our website. Most of the research that we've been doing goes back to 2005 or 2007, the newest things being those rental housing briefs.
Okay. Yeah, I can see a lot of valuable information here, all the way from somebody who might be new to being a landlord. You know, there's just some basic information about the different subsidized housing that are available, because I think there's maybe a lot of confusion or just vagueness if you're not in the know. So I see this as a great way to have a kind of a one-stop shop to find out all this information. And then also, obviously, the data that you just mentioned, that's really helpful for owners to know, so that they can see if their rents are on target with the rest of the marketplace. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe let's pull out some of these subsidized housing options, and there's a good way to compare one to another, or what kind of a starting point that a landlord should go to?
So there's a couple of things to sort of think about. People often confuse Section 8 vouchers and a program called project-based Section 8. And so Section 8 vouchers are where the renter, they literally used to get like a certificate that they would walk around with. Now it's not quite so literally a piece of paper, but the subsidy is attached to the person. And when that person goes and rents a place, the housing authority, which is a quasi-governmental agency, helps to pay a portion of their rent, and then the household pays 30 to 40% of their income towards the rent. So two parties pay rent to the landlord, but they can use that in any private market or tax credit development, but they cannot use that in public housing or a project-based Section 8 unit. And so public housing is, you know, the big buildings that you think of, where the housing authorities access government dollars to build the properties. And while someone is living there, they pay 30% of their income for rent. To qualify to live there, it really is just an income calculation for all of the housing programs that are really sort of the core subsidized housing programs. They all are income qualifying programs. So a household has to be earning less than 50 or 60% of area median income, or less than 30% of area median income to qualify. Project-based Section 8 is where the property has a contract with HUD directly, and every tenant who lives in that property is only paying 30% of their income for their housing. Similar to public housing, but that is a program that there really isn't any new funding for these developments today, but back in the 70s, when these were really active in getting funding, any private market landlord could decide, yep, I want to opt in and do this contract with HUD and develop these units. And so they're required to operate off of waiting lists and different things. So there's some challenges for renters in getting access to those. And then Section 42 is the also known as LIHTC, or the Low Income Housing Tax Credit program. And that again is where a developer goes and accesses this federal resource when they're building the property. And then there's restrictions about who can live there at what % of area median income. And there's maximum rents that they can charge, but it is not, but renters actually pay like a full rent. They don't get a rent reduction based on their income, but if they make too much money, they can't live there. So it's sort of targeted to really help sort of like middle income households where, you know, if you think about like your teachers or police officers, tax credits are really a program that serves a lot of those populations really well.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great, I can see on your webpage, and for anybody who's just listening to this and not viewing it, you can go see this, what we're looking at on YouTube, or you can just go directly to housinglink.org. And right now we're looking at the page that says subsidized housing, and it has some links to these different programs that Sue was just mentioning and covering. So more details are on the website. So Sue, can you talk to the idea that a lot of landlords have a hesitancy about working with tenants that are on, say, Section 8 or some other type of subsidy, and what resources are available to landlords so that they can become more comfortable with the idea and the renters who are using these programs?
So there's a few things. You know, first of all, the housing authorities have changed the way that they operate their programs quite a bit over the last 10 to 20 years. So I will say that the housing authorities have really reviewed their protocols and looked at their documentation and things to really think about how do we make sure that we're treating the landlord as a customer in this process and an ally. So I think that's been great to see. The way that the Section 8 voucher program works from a landlord perspective is they advertise that they're willing to accept a Section 8 voucher from a renter, or if they hadn't thought about it, when someone contacts them and, you know, is interested in renting and has a voucher, all the landlord has to do is run the background check on a person like they normally do. They can use their normal resident selection criteria, go through all of their normal process, and when they decide, yeah, this is a great candidate for my property, I want to rent to them, then at that point, they'll be asked to sign a request for tenancy form. And so they fill out this form, which gets submitted to the housing authority. And the housing authority uses that to look at what utility is the renter paying and what is that average monthly rental cost. And so on our site, you can see in the subsidized housing section, we have this Section 8 payment standards link. And so you can go here and look at where in the metro area, or we have a list of all the housing authorities in greater Minnesota. And you can select, I'm just going to pick Metro HRA because it's the largest geographic one in the Twin Cities. But when you select that geography, it will tell you what is the maximum rent amount that the housing authority can look at paying for a unit. And then what are the utility allowances? And so if you're in an exception community, that means that there's slightly higher rent limits that apply because the nature of that community is just that the rents are higher, like Maple Grove, Minnetonka, Hopkins, Roseville, those suburbs that are really tight to the, you know, core areas where folks are really wanting to live. The rents are a little bit higher, so the payment standard goes a little bit higher. So for a 2-bedroom in an exception community, it's $1,265 a month. So the housing authority looks at the rent that you're charging to see, does it fall within the payment standard? Because if it's, you know, a 2-bedroom for $1,600 a month, they can't pay that rent. It's outside of the rules allowed by the federal government. And so then they might contact the landlord and have a conversation and see if there can be any adjustments in that rent. But generally, you know, assuming that your rent falls within the payment standard, sometimes the utility allowance, if there's things that might typically be paid for by a tenant, but the landlord is paying for it, there sometimes can be adjustments made to look at that payment standard where they can say, oh, payment standard plus utility allowance, it works out. And so it doesn't become an issue. And so they do that step. It actually goes very quickly. And then you sign a lease with the renter, And then there's an inspection of the property, which is a basic health and safety inspection where, I mean, again, these are federal dollars that are being used. And so they're required by the federal government to come in and do this inspection looking for common items that will fail is like missing outlet covers, broken windows or torn window screens, exposed electrical wiring, trip hazards, like if there's a rip or a tear in a linoleum floor, that kind of thing. So most people who are maintaining their property in a good condition don't have difficulty passing the inspection. So, but that inspection does need to happen before the house, and you have to pass it before the housing authority can pay any rent to you. If you do fail the inspection for some reason, you have up to 30 days to make the repair and report it to the housing authority. Again, most of the time, I think when properties are in good condition, they don't have a significant issue with inspections, but it certainly can happen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good to understand the process because we often get as landlords, if we're advertising a property, people ask, do you accept Section 8? And so this is a good place to start to see just are the rents that we're asking for within line of what Section 8 would cover and allow, and then just what to expect if we're going to proceed with that.
Yeah, and the housing authority is part of the process. They calculate, I mean, so say the rent, just for easy math, we're going to say it's $1,200 a month for that 2-bedroom, and say that 30% of the income for the tenant is $200 a month. Then the renter will pay you a check of $200 a month for their rent. And the housing authority will, usually they use ACH deposit, and they will automatically pay you $1,000 a month for the entire 12 months of the lease. So you're really guaranteed that tenant portion of the rent, or the housing authority portion of the rent, I should say, during the tenancy. And in fact, like during COVID-19 and the uncertainty of the times that we're in now, the housing authorities are fully funded and making all of their rent payments without any delay. So there are times when it can be beneficial to have that subsidy attached to the person. And then the tenant is responsible for their portion. If they ever fall behind and don't pay their portion of the rent, I do know that the housing authorities, any communication that you make to the tenant about lease violations or anything related to their lease, which obviously non-payment of rent is a lease violation, you copy the housing authority on those communications, and they will reach out to the tenant in addition to you reaching out to the tenant and let them know how serious it is that they, haven't made that rent payment. And they really work sort of with you to help get that person to, be back in alignment with their lease, even if it's like a noise violation or an unauthorized tenant living in the unit. They really do, as long as they're informed, they will step in and have a conversation with the renter. They won't mediate a dispute between you and the renter, but they do like to be informed of any of those lease violations. And if the tenant should continue to not pay their portion of the rent, when there's not an eviction moratorium, you can certainly file an eviction against someone, even if the housing authority has paid their portion and the tenant has not. So you don't lose any of your rights as a property owner when it comes to the rules and regulations of the lease.
Okay. Yeah, that's good support to have, one more person to, and a person with authority, to speak to the tenant or send them a notice about the violation and encourage them to get back in alignment with the lease. So definitely a good resource there.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we switch gears a little bit here and talk about the veterans initiatives that HousingLink is involved in.
Yeah, and for that, since we're sharing the site, I'm just going to bring up Homes for Veterans under the Property and Owner and Manager tab, because it just spells it out nicely on the page. But what this is we're partnering with the Minnesota Department of Veteran Affairs, and then MACV, the Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans, and the local VA programs throughout the state. And what we do is often, so in Minnesota, we have about 200 veterans who are on the homeless registry in the state. And of these veterans, about half of them have access to a VASH voucher, which is a Section 8 voucher on steroids. So it's the Section 8 voucher paired with regular case management services provided by staff from the VA. And so that's like often weekly or monthly in the unit visits when it isn't COVID with the renter or the veteran, as well as some other additional supports as needed. And so there's those. And then the other half of the veterans often come with an SSVS voucher, which is through MAXI, or other resources that MAXI is able to bring to the table to help house these homeless veterans. There are a few other case management agencies also involved, but these are the two big ones that cover, I would say, 90% of the veterans who are on that homeless registry. What we're able to do is we're pairing our Beyond Backgrounds program, which is a landlord risk mitigation fund, with these vouchers and a couple of additional incentives. There are some of these veterans who have been chronic homeless, and so long-term homeless, might have some felony convictions in their background, might have some evictions in their background. And so what we're doing is assessing each of the veterans and those who are high barriers. So they have probably more than one of those barriers in their background. There's probably, a couple of felonies or an eviction plus a felony in their background. And those individuals, if you choose to make an exception to your rental screening criteria and accept someone, one of these veterans who's participating in these programs, we can offer up to $1,000 of an incentive fund for taking a high barrier veteran. And we know that sometimes that inspection process with the VASH voucher or the SSVS might slow things down a little bit, so we can actually move the veteran in prior to that Section 8 inspection happening, and we can help cover that rent amount up to the point that it passes inspection. So that's a pretty cool resource to be able to bring to the table. I know that Minneapolis Public Housing Authority can also do that with some of their programming. And then our Beyond Backgrounds Risk Mitigation Fund is $2,000 of insurance, essentially, that's above and beyond security deposit. So each of these veterans who gets housed under the program their landlord has access to this risk fund. And all throughout the term of the lease, our Beyond Backgrounds team are contacting both the veteran and the landlord throughout the whole 12 months of the lease to make sure that rent has been paid and there's no issues happening in the unit or any behavior issues with the tenant. So we really try to stay in touch with all parties so that if any issues arise, we can help to troubleshoot and resolve any things that might come to pass. So we've been involved in this program since, there was a launch with Governor Walz on July 30th of 2019. So coming up on a year.
Okay. Well, that's definitely a cool program for the people that are in need of it. Obviously, we want to take care of our veterans, and so we want to make sure that they're not homeless. I'm wondering, is there a certain type of property or unit type that fits well for this? Partially because are these typically single individuals, or is there families involved here?
Yeah. So because these veterans are all a part of the homeless veteran registry, we actually know a lot about them. And about 90% of the veterans are either a single adult or an adult couple household. So really we're looking primarily for studio and one bedroom units. There's high demand for the core Twin Cities, both Minneapolis and St. Paul and surrounding suburbs. However, we do have veterans throughout the state. And so I think we would always welcome any listings, to come to us if folks are willing to consider these veterans. Oftentimes we will be asking that someone consider an exception to their rental criteria because someone, may likely have something in their background that would normally get them denied access to the rental housing. There are a few family veteran households, and so certainly there are times where we're looking for a 2 or 3 bedroom, but definitely the biggest need is those studio and 1 bedroom units.
Okay. Yeah, and as as you described there's going to be some high risk situations, but it's very helpful to have this program backing these people up, that it's providing support services to them, it's staying in touch, I'm assuming, working out different issues that come up, and then also providing the insurance above and beyond the deposit. So that, that'll go a long way, I think, with landlords wanting to participate.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things about this program too is it really brings together a variety of agencies. So the landlord is never really, at times I've heard landlords complain about, I signed up for this program and then the case manager was gone. Well, we've really structured this to make sure that it isn't just one individual person who's the contact. We really have it structured so that you can contact any one of us at HousingLink and we'll help to resolve the issue, or anyone at MYPV or the VA. There really is, we all have data sharing agreements, and we all have release of information forms signed between the agencies and with the veterans, so that everyone has the legal capability to talk with folks and about folks as needed. So I think it's really been a great program to be a part of so far. I know that in the last year we've housed over 40 veterans through the program, and we've paid quite a few incentive fund and vacancy loss fund payments, but there has been no draw upon the risk mitigation fund under the veterans program to date. So,
well, that's great that you have that statistics to back up that.
Yeah.
Why don't we use that as a transition into some of the data that's available on the HousingLink? So what can you tell us about the trends that are happening now, especially, with COVID-19 and all that?
Yeah. So I'll pop back over to the COVID-19 rental housing trends tab within the data and research section of the site. And, everyone has so closely been watching what's happening with COVID-19. And so far, we have not seen any significant impact on median rents in the Twin Cities metro area. I will say most of this data is in the Twin Cities metro area because it pulls from our Twin Cities rental review report, which is it's a subscription report that we have that comes out quarterly, and it really analyzes the apartment market in the 7-county metro compared to the shadow market of single-family townhome, duplex, and condo rentals. And so we're capturing all of the data in the Twin Cities on these properties that we can get our hands on. We don't have the same data sources statewide at this point, so we're not able to do it fully statewide just yet. But you can see in January, a 1-bedroom was at $1,589, and that has gone down to $1,537 in April. This follows a typical trend line that we see sort of year over year, where January, usually we see rents dip a little bit in December, January, February, and then April is when they start to tick back up because leasing season really kicks off, right, in the spring. And then we usually see things kind of go up until about October, November, and then they start to decline a little bit again. So it's been really interesting to see that there hasn't been any significant dip or change. We're continuing to see vacancies be advertised. People are still moving. I think we all know that. And we work closely, as I said, with the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association and Greater Minnesota Housing Fund and others. And I mean, everyone is tracking what's happening with rent payments right now. And we're very pleased to see that rents are coming in strongly for most properties throughout the state. So, there's not really a significant impact to date on the average rents.
And if somebody wanted to dig closer into like a specific city or zip code, do they have that capabilities at all with the website?
So yeah, unfortunately we don't just make that publicly available through the site. We do have the ability to work with folks to do some custom reporting and things. But for the rental housing trends, that isn't just available through the site. We do have, if someone's really interested in understanding what subsidized housing is available in their community, and like how many tax credit units or how many project-based, you can come into our streams database. And so that's actually the second item under our data and research tab. And that database, you can look at I'm just gonna pick state-funded projects by city, by county. You can zoom in on the map to sort of figure out where things are. I'm just gonna kind of zoom in, try to go West Metro. We'll see if I can get there. And as you zoom into the map, it will sort of better refine things and still start to pull the data. There's usually too many properties to display sometimes. Yeah. So they pop up on the map if you're using the map view, and then you can, when you click show results, it will pull everything below the page into what looks almost like an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can export this data to be able to dig into that a little bit more deeply. This does not have any rental contact information, so this isn't meant to be a tool for renters. This really is focused on researchers, policymakers, planners, being able to use this as a tool to understand what's happening in their city.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great resource. Can you tell me, okay, so it's the streams link and how we get to there.
Yeah, so you get to the streams link from, it's in the data and research tab, and it's the second item in that drop-down tab. So, yeah.
Perfect.
And we've had that data available since about 2005. And we work with HUD, Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, and then the local cities and counties to make sure that we're capturing all of the federal and state funded properties within those communities. And that is available statewide.
Okay. Very good. So we've covered the different subsidized housing options that landlords have. We've covered some of the data options that we can do research and see what's happening in the marketplace. And we've covered the veterans of initiatives that you're working on. Are there any other major things that we should be aware of with HousingLink?
Yeah, so I think there's two other things that we have right now that are pretty exciting. One is the Beyond Backgrounds program overall. We have the Veterans Initiative specifically, and then we also have programs that cover a vast majority of the Twin Cities metro area. We're still seeking funding to really meaningfully cover Hennepin County, but we're working with different agencies in Dakota County, Anoka, Carver, Scott, Washington, Metro HRA, the Outside In Collaborative in St. Paul, Ramsey County, and then obviously the Homes for Veterans program. And so again, this is that landlord risk fund where you can get up to $2,000 essentially of like insurance above and beyond that security deposit. So at the termination of the lease, if there's damages that the security deposit hasn't covered, if there's unpaid rent above and beyond what the security deposit covers, court eviction filing fees, or any other, unusual circumstances, we have a fair amount of flexibility of what that might be. You can access up to the $2,000. We launched this program in November of 2019. Not a lot of activity happened in November and December of that year. So really, I think it got, much more activity after that. But actually it was 2017, I'm sorry. We've had 2 years of the program, 18 and 19. We've housed a total of 162 renters through the program, and there's only been 2 claims against that risk fund. So I think those are pretty good odds for the renters doing a great job. And we found that of all of the renters, of the 162 who got housing, we had 5 people who were in early lease termination of some sort. And then everyone else, we have about 20 households who've graduated from the program. And of those, 85% remained in place or moved either to a more affordable unit or to a unit that better met the needs of their family. But the vast majority of them actually stayed living in the place where they had moved into with their initial lease under the Beyond Backgrounds program. So our program stays with that renter for a year. And then when they graduate from the program, that's when, if there's any outstanding rent amounts or anything, that the program could be accessed. But again, we've only had 2 people access it. So it's been pretty successful. Folks are really doing well. they all have a barrier of some kind in their background, whether it's low income, recent eviction, felony conviction, or multiple misdemeanor convictions. And depending on the program they come with, they may or may not have some intensive case management services, but they all have our Beyond Background staff reaching out on a monthly basis to both the renter and the landlord to check in on how things are going. So it's been a very successful program.
So how do you know if you're a good fit for this? Does the landlord apply or does the tenant apply? And then is there a fee that somebody pays, or how does it work?
Yeah. So the renters are really the ones who apply for the program because they have to qualify. They have to have the right barriers to qualify for the funding sources that we have, and to help connect them to the case management services. And so really the way it works for landlords is the renter might show up at your door saying that they're part of the Beyond Backgrounds program. And then the ask of a landlord is that you consider this person, and that you would make an exception to your normal rental criteria to rent to the household. And you can do that. It is legal under fair housing to do that. You just make a note in your file that you're making an exception due to participation in the Beyond Backgrounds program, or like the Homes for Veterans program, if it's a veteran. And so the case managers throughout the Twin Cities really know who's eligible where, and they're very actively applying with their clients for the programs. We are funded by several foundation and government sources, so Medica Foundation, the Department of Veterans Affairs, Minnesota Housing, Family Housing Fund, the POLAD Family Foundation, Target Foundation, all are supporters of the work. And we continue to add more. Bigelow Foundation and Mardig Foundation, St. Paul Foundation are all organizations we're working with. And so it really is, just being open. If you hear a new program name, Beyond Backgrounds might be that program. So we try to have it be no more work for the landlord.
Yeah. So then does the resident pay any fee for this insurance, or is it all through the funding that you've mentioned?
So at this time, the residents don't pay any fee for the insurance. We're actually looking at creating more of an insurance, like a true insurance model for the program, where renters would be able to sort of buy into the program. But to date, we have not finalized that with any insurance actuarial. So it is supported by foundations and government at this point. But we do have pretty good oversight of it. We haven't seen any abuse of the program by anyone. So it's based on other organizations around the nation who've done this work. And typically they've found, out in Seattle, Denver, Los Angeles, there's larger programs. And the one in Seattle is operated the longest, and they saw that generally less than 10% of program participants ever access the fund. And I mean, we're at like less than 0.5%. So I think we're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
So, and then
do you have any,
I'm
sorry.
Oh, sure. Well, I was going to say the other big thing that we have coming out this summer is our new product that we're making available, which is called Housing Hub. And this is it's the first time that we're actually charging property managers or owners for a product that we're making available. But what it is a centralized waiting list tool for any rental housing in Minnesota. And so if there's a property that's operating a waiting list, they can, they'll be able to add it to Housing Hub, and renters will be able to create one account and join waiting lists from throughout the entire state of Minnesota, and be able to see where they are on the waiting list and update their contact information in one place. We started to develop this after talking with renters and with property managers about the challenges of keeping information up to date on all the different waiting lists that exist in the affordable space, but then also in talking with some owners around COVID-19 and how things are changing in the way that people are thinking about managing their properties. I think this will be a great resource to consider in, when you do have a vacancy coming available, do you want to have sort of a ready list of folks who have self-reported to you their household size, their income, and what they're looking for, that they really are interested in your property, so that rather than trying to field a lot of phone calls and visits to the property, you would already have a list of folks on a waiting list who are ready to come in and rent from you.
Okay. And this was typically be used for the housing projects, or would a market rate landlord use this as well?
So I do think that there are some market rate properties that have such high demand that they do maintain a waiting list. And so they certainly, would be welcome to use this. Initially, we started out developing it because of the subsidized market, but we've had such a low vacancy rate for so long that a lot of properties have started thinking about things a little bit differently. So it actually will be open to both private market and subsidized properties to access.
Okay. Well, neat. Again, lots of great resources there. I had one question going back to the beyond backgrounds topic, and I'm not sure if you know the answer off the top of your head, but do you know what the demand is from potential renters, or do you have like a waiting list in people that have applied to your program and that are out looking for housing?
Yeah, so at any given point in time, we're usually turning away about 50% of the people who apply for the program because they're looking to, because they're coming from Hennepin County, and we don't have a fully funded program in Hennepin County yet. The other thing that we see is, at any given point in time, we probably have about 10 to 15 households searching in Dakota County. We probably have about 10 households searching in Anoka County, and then probably, a handful in Carver, Washington, and Scott counties. Ramsey County, we typically have around another 15 or 20 households that are searching for housing at any given point in time. So there's a big difference between like the people who are searching for a place and those who've actually gotten housed. And so we do, so the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, they have a time limit, right? After 90 days, if you haven't been able to find a place with your voucher, you might lose it. You can ask for an extension. Our program, we actually give people up to 6 months to find a place. And if they haven't found something, but they're still actively searching, we'll extend it for another 3 months and then up to an entire year. We have very few people who have taken the entire year to find a place. Normally people find something within about 3 months of searching, but we definitely have capacity to serve over 300 households per year, and we have not hit that many people being housed. So there definitely, there's certainly more people out there searching with the program than those we've been able to house.
Sure. Okay. Well, yeah, again, a great resource for those residents who are going to have a barrier to entry because of their background. So
Yeah.
I know we're all, aware of and concerned about the availability of housing, especially for people that have these barriers. So this is a great, I think, solution that's been born out of that need.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's, fun too. We're looking at creating a program where we're going to partner with Build Wealth Minnesota. They do a lot of work to help, low-income folks build towards home ownership. And as part of that, they're adding on a renter education program. And graduates of that program are actually, we're seeking funding for them to then also be paired with the Beyond Backgrounds Risk Fund so that they have even stronger possibility of overcoming some of their background and getting housed and building toward home ownership. So it's been a really fun program to work with.
Nice. Very good. Well, we're going to get close to wrapping things up here. Any final things that you want to share about HousingLink and just what landlords should keep in mind when thinking about your resources that are available?
Yeah, so I would say that HousingLink of today is not the HousingLink of 1999 or 2000. We are constantly evolving and changing, adding new information and resources. Beyond Backgrounds, I think, is a great example of a new program that we've been able to add. In 2020, probably about the fall of 2020, we'll be launching a free education series for property owners and managers in Minnesota. partnering with the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, as well as Kathy McKenna-Harmon and her My Coach training program, to bring resources to small owners that folks just might not normally get access to or have the time to find. And we're going to kind of bring it all into one central place, and partnering too with Minnesota Multi-Housing Association. So I think, we're always working on things. We welcome any questions or inquiries from, landlords. So feel free to come to our website, reach out to us. If you're interested in the veterans programming, Kahari Smith Brewer is our outreach person, and he'd be happy to talk with you and help get you connected to the program. And we're happy we answer all kinds of questions, whether it's about, someone wants to add a companion animal to their unit, what does that mean? To, I have a renter who moved out without saying anything, what do I do? We help connect people to all kinds of answers. So we're happy to be here as a resource, and we love to get your vacancy listings on our site so that we can help people get into your housing.
Yep. Well, yeah, obviously you've got something that you're offering to landlords as far as a place to advertise their rentals, and you're offering a lot of value in order to get us to your site with all the resources that are there. So I appreciate that approach. It's not just another listing site, it's a listing site with a lot of resources.
Yeah. So
as we close out here, I do have just a couple of questions about you so that the audience can get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
And number one will be, why do you get up in the morning?
Wow, that's a good question. So, I love the work that I do. I love the unique nature of HousingLink and the way that we get to operate in the world. We're really an intermediary agency that, working between landlords and tenants and government. So we get to be involved in a lot of different conversations, but at the end of the day, we're helping people find a place for their family to live, and also helping just to sort of lift everyone up. So that's really a lot of it. It's fun to come to work.
Yeah. Well, that's good to have a job that you like.
Yeah.
Very good. And question number two is, what's an event or person in your history that was monumental in creating who you are today?
So I hope this isn't too cliche. I will say that my dad is actually someone who was extremely influential in my life. He is someone who, had gone through some struggles at different points in his life, but was someone who really came to be a very open, compassionate person, and really unconditionally loving, and always having time for his colleagues and his friends and his children and family, and always was a helpful resource to people around him. And so I think I learned so much from him through, the changes that he went through in his adult life, and being able to see that. I hope that I've been able to model some of that, so I'd say Dad.
Yeah, very good. Good tributes to him. And then, so as we wrap up here, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you or HousingLink in general if they have questions or like more information?
Sure. So I'll just plug the website one more time. It's housinglink.org. And the best way to get me is probably email, which is sgomez, so SGOMEZ @housinglink.org. And then my number is 612-767-4682, extension 109. And that does ring through on my cell phone. So I'm always available.
Okay. Well, Sue, I appreciate so much you taking the time to share about HousingLink with the audience.
Yeah, thanks.
And yes, of course. And then to our audience, thank you for tuning into this episode. If you got anything out of this, be sure to let us know that you're listening and watching. A great way to do that is just comment on our YouTube video, or you can go ahead into the Apple Podcast platform and give us a rating and review there. So we appreciate you tuning in, and we'll be sure to catch you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in to Maximizing Your Property Value, the apartment owner's guide to operating rental properties as a successful business. If you're considering scaling up, downsizing, or right-sizing your real estate investment portfolio, it's important to know how to determine your property's value in today's market. That's why I've put together a free ebook for you called How to Calculate Your Investment Property's Value. To get your copy, go to www.realestatestyles.com/value. Now, if you found any value in today's show, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter, YouTube channel, and podcast through your favorite podcast player. All the links are in the show notes. And would you do me a big favor? Help me get the word out about this show by sharing with your friends on Facebook and LinkedIn. And lastly, we appreciate your 5-star rating on iTunes. I really appreciate you and wish you the best in your real estate investing career. Signing off, I'm John Stiles with Bridge Realty. Make it a great day.